Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. So the first thing I'm going to do is just introduce myself, tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm the Boomi practice manager over at Big Compass. I've been here for going on 3 years now. And while I've been at Big Compass, I've gotten a broad scope of integration experience using a bunch of different tools. And some of my favorite are, of course, Boomi, Snowflake, AWS, and the GCP platform. Just working here and throughout my entire career, I've kind of fostered a great passion for exploring and creatively displaying data, finding things that people didn't know existed, trying to get good content and value from that data. And then when I'm not doing anything with integration, usually I'm rock climbing, mountain biking, and snowboarding if there's snow. All right, so just a quick introduction into Big Compass. So we are a integration-based company. Our big message is we use data agility to fuel insights for streamlined automation. This can come up in a variety of different ways. We work in API enablement and security, as well as big data, and are pretty much willing to connect anything to anything else. But for today, we're focusing on two of our partners, and that's Boomi and Snowflake. And of course, for Boomi, we're focusing on their DCP platform. So their DCP platform, the first thing we'll do is we'll introduce that to you, just go over a little bit of a strategy about how you can use it, how to configure it, and then we'll get into an example where we've integrated some different tables from Salesforce, a MySQL database, and pumped those into Snowflake using a couple of different Snowflake features. So introduction to DCP. DCP is what Boomi refers to as their data catalog and prep tool. So this tool is mostly used to help you identify any siloed or dark data that could be at your organization. The idea is that you can hook up pretty much any kind of database source or a lot of different kinds of file systems such as S3, and they give you a natural language processing capability in their search so that you can go through all these data sources and find different content that you might not have been previously aware of at your organization. Once you've found all that data, they give you all kinds of abilities to combine that data from different sources, as well as move that data to new destinations and format it, combine it, just however, change it and aggregate it as you see fit. So this is just a quick kind of architecture of the way Boomi DCP sits in your organization. You host it on an EMR in Amazon, and it leverages Spark and a Hadoop back end so that it can perform all of its magic. For today, you can see that Boomi DCP usually sits kind of in the middle of a bunch of different systems. Here on this example, it's hooked up to Teradata as well as Snowflake. We've replaced Teradata with just Salesforce and a MySQL database for ease on our end, but we are still hooking it up to Snowflake, as well as leveraging some S3 storage for some other examples of ingestion into Snowflake. So the value in DCP generally comes from its ability to kind of present your data in a Googleable format. As we said before, they leverage natural language processing, and it creates a one-stop shop for pretty much all of your organization's data. Anything that you want that you didn't even know you had, you can find. And of course, you also get these fast and easy jobs, workflows that you can create to get the data that you have to the people that need it. And it's all created and accessible in one very easy to use and streamlined API, or sorry, UI. Cool. So for your first step, generally you want to kind of figure out what you're trying to do with DCP. And there's really two big questions I like to ask. What data do you want and where do you want it? So as soon as you know what data that you want, if you don't know what data that you want, you can obviously use it to explore. But if you're looking for customer data, you can start exploring for customer data. If you're looking for sales data, you can start looking for sales data. Pretty much any kind of data that you would look for up to and not limited by user logins, histories for APIs, and anything else that might be stored. And then, of course, where do you want it? What kind of destination are you looking to organize around? Are you trying to go for a sort of hub and spoke model where you want to move everything into a data warehouse? and just have a job that syncs every day? Is this more of a one-time bulk movement where you're trying to get something from your data warehouse to another location so that people can use it for visualization? And once you have those questions answered, you can start combining and moving your data. So configuring DCP is incredibly easy. There's just a couple of steps. The first thing you do is you just install your adapters. They've got a lot of in-house adapters for Snowflake, MySQL, Oracle, the Google Cloud, BigQuery, and S3 bucket, of course, just to name some. Then you're going to set up your data stores. The data store sort of acts as the just general account information for Snowflake. It's what's your account name, what region is it hosted in, and then you set up your data source, which is going to be your actual credential information, as well as specifically, like I said today for our example, you're going to put in your database that you want to access and your login credentials, as well as specifically for Snowflake, any warehouse that you would like to use for computing. And then as soon as you've got that set up, you can import and browse for every data store that you've set up. Once you've gone through that first initial setup, there's a couple of questions you can ask yourself to help just set up the platform and make it more secure and help you get more benefit from it. The first question I always like to ask people when you're working with data is, do you have PII data? DCP has a lot of good built-in features to help you manage, mask, and secure those PII columns. And we're going to go into that a little bit today. And then, of course, do you need to move this data to another system? And if you are moving data to another system, is there any business logic you'd like to use for the import? Is there anything you need to flag on? Is there anything that you'd like to aggregate? And just having that business logic kind of in your mind before you start building these jobs. Cool. And now that we've gotten just kind of a general introduction out of the way, we're going to go ahead and switch to a walkthrough as well as a demo of how to use DCP. So the first thing I'm going to do is take you to the home page. And this is going to be just a basic dashboard. It's going to give you an overview of everything that's going on in your DCP instance. As you can see, I've got 10 different data sources hooked up. That's accumulated to over 408 data sets, and that's just for 10 data sources, as well as 7 different jobs that we've set up to just kind of move a lot of that data around. And for those jobs, you can see different activities. As you can see, we've had 8 successful runs, a couple of them failed, but we have aborted or canceled none of them so far, and currently nothing's running. Similarly, for each of those, you can see any recent import activities. So as you can see here, we've had a couple of recent imports. Today, I went and I hooked up a Snowflake instance that we're using for a snowpipe example, which is another one of Snowflake's great features. And this will just give you an idea of the different imports that you've run. And if they failed, you can get a little bit more information on them and start debugging down into that source and figuring out why that import wasn't working. As far as setting everything up, everything is pretty much managed in the Manage button. If you come in here, your connections are all configured down within these 3 shapes. First, you can install your adapters. We've already got our adapters installed, but if we hop in here, we can see that there's a lot of different adapters that you can use. We've got an S3, we've got Apache Hive, we've got EMR HDFS, as well as a MySQL that we've installed. And if you wanted to hook up something different, such as SAP, then that's all readily available to you as well. The next step would be to set up your data stores. As I said, as you can see here, we've got 9 different data stores. And while setting up the data store, this is mostly just a way to separate by account. So you can see we've got 2 different Snowflake data stores set up. This is because they're both hosted in different accounts so that we can grab data from one, move it to the other, and just keep all of this separate. And once you have your accounts set up, you can set up your data source, which is just, as I said before, mostly a credential-based configuration. So you come in here, you choose your warehouse for Snowflake specifically because we need something to perform the operation. And Snowflake does operation on the fly with their compute warehousing, which just helps you to separate different resources. And then we're connecting to a database called Boomi. The user is, of course, me, Heartland, and you just specify your password. And at that point, you're pretty much off to the races. They do offer a couple of other options for most of the platforms, specifically for Snowflake, because that's one of the products we're focusing on today. They offer a couple of different tools to leverage a lot of Snowflake's capabilities. You can, for example, if you wanted to check this box, that would keep your client session alive. Generally, I don't recommend doing this, as it essentially keeps the warehouse spinning, and that can create a lot of additional cost. But if this is something that you need to be constantly up and constantly available, it's a good option. And if you're going to be dumping any kind of data into this resource and you're not just trying to browse it, you generally have to allow it as an output destination. So I'm going to go ahead and click here just so we can make sure that this Snowflake Snowpipe example source is available for data loading. And specifically for Snowflake as well, they offer a bulk loading ability. And if you click, we don't have any bulk load data sets that we're really going to be focusing on today. A lot of our example data sets are going to be pretty small from Salesforce. But if you started getting up towards the tens and hundreds of thousands of rows, this would be a good option to help you leverage their copy into and bulk loading capabilities in Snowflake. So once we've got all of that set up, it'll generally tell you success. If you're still looking to see whether or not your connection is currently working, you can click on the connection. It'll bring it up on the right. And then you can click up here and you can reinitiate an import. This is also a schedulable feature. You can schedule your import to happen every day if you wanted to. You can export your different data dictionaries, which is just going to be a list of the different metadata and stuff that's available inside of that source, as well as validate your connection. So if we go ahead and click that, we can see that our Snowpipe example data source is currently connected. So at that point, once you've got all your data sources connected and imported, that's the point at which you can start leveraging the most powerful part of DCP, which is their searching capabilities. So wherever you are in the platform, they're always going to have this search available up here. And as we said before, this allows for different NLP-based searches. So I can do something like tables named customer. And that should bring up anything that's named customer throughout your different data sources. As you can see, I've got one from Snowflake, and it's also bringing up something called named credential and named credential ID from Salesforce, just because those might have some customer named values on the inside of it. And this is available throughout the entire platform, but if you want to actually go and get a little more capability from the search, you can hit this Explore button and then hit Dataset Explorer. So once we come in here, it's, again, the same basic idea. We're just surfing through our data, but we get some additional capabilities in here. So on the right, you can see you can sort by schema. So if I wanted to do anything by Salesforce, we could get to that by schema, and that would just bring up anything that's sitting inside of our Salesforce schema. And then similarly, we can also sort by data source. So if I wanted to see everything that was coming in from an S3 bucket, you can see a couple of test files that we've had come in here, and you can also continue to add different data sources until you've got everything that you want to look at. So these are just a couple of the data sources we've hooked up. Salesforce tends to have hundreds of tables, so that's something I'm going to leave out just for now so that I can look at my other data sources and have a good view on them. And what this allows you to do is if you were to click into any of these, so for our example we set up today, we're going to be comparing marketing costs versus our Salesforce sales data by different lead types. Essentially, we're just taking a look at, we've spent X amount of money on web advertising or physical advertising or outreach programs, and how much money have we made in those different avenues. So if we were to click on our marketing cost analysis table, we can see we've only got 3 rows here. But this is, of course, if we were to click on a table with more data, it would show a lot more data. And the reason we've only got 3 rows is because this is actually aggregated data that we created with DCP. And if you kind of surf around up here, you can see different, some different examples about the columns. And this is just going to give you statistics. So this is by advertising type. We can do sum cost, and that's just going to give you an idea of the mean, average, standard deviations of your different costs, as well as lead source and the sum amount, which is going to be the amount that we got from each lead source. So they have a couple of other things available up here. If you hop into data dictionary, that's just going to show you all of your columns and the different types of those columns based on the table. And then if you were to come into lineage, you can actually see that if this table was created by DCP, how is it created? So we've got only 1 point for our lineage in this table, and that's because we used a single job to create this table. And if you take a look at our marketing cost analysis, it was created by the job join marketing data tables, which if we were to hop over here into jobs, we would be able to take a look at it, which we will in a minute. It tells you the number of columns you got, the data types, and like I said, this is mostly used for just checking out where this data came from. It came from a join. That's because we joined 2 different tables, our aggregated marketing costs table and our Salesforce data table, sales data table, both of which are aggregated tables from other tables in each system. And then, of course, it lets you see the output. Our output was to Snowflake. Our data source was also Snowflake. We put it into the public schema, and our strategy is overwrite. The general idea behind this is every time we run the job, it's just going to give us an updated 3-row assessment of just costs and revenue from each marketing point. So the other things that it'll also allow you to do is look at similar data sets. Currently, this one doesn't have any similar data sets or related resources, but in related resources, you can look at jobs, and that'll bring up just the different jobs that are involved in this table. We've come up with a dump marketing data to Snowflake job that is taking this table and putting it into our second Snowflake instance. But if we were to hop into some other tables, such as our aggregated marketing costs table, we could hop over here to related resources, and this would show that our Salesforce sales data is a related table. This is most likely because we're sorting on the same, excuse me, we're sorting on the same values, those values of different marketing types. So if we were to click into this table, it's just going to show that they are related just based on your amount of columns and the amount of data that you've got inside of that table. So if now that we've kind of surfed through our data, we can hop over to jobs and take a look at, now that we have this data, what do we want to do with it? So we came up with 3 specific jobs for this example, and that was aggregate marketing data, aggregating sales data, and then, of course, join marketing data tables. So a good example of just a lot of the capabilities is we used our aggregate sales data to hop into the opportunity table in Salesforce, just grab a bunch of data from there. And then as you're creating this job, you have the opportunity to join different data sets. This will bring up any data inside of here that you could join that you would want. You can also enrich your data if you wanted to come up with a function. A lot of people, if you are just getting the, for example, if we wanted a full name column, then you could create a function that just basically concats first name with last name. And as you can see, it brings up a lot of different stuff just to kind of help you create these functions. Currently, we didn't have a need for any kind of enrichment, as our data set is relatively small. And then you're also able to choose the columns. So the opportunities table is huge, but we were only interested in a couple of the fields. So we chose the amount generated by that opportunity, the lead source that that opportunity came from, whether or not that's closed, and whether or not that's won. So the reason we chose these last two columns is we had a little bit of filtering we wanted to do on them, which is the next step. If you hop into add filter and take a look at all of the filter, I made a filter called one data, which is essentially just checking, is this opportunity closed? Is it equal to true? And is this opportunity one? Is opportunity one equal to true? And this is a pretty dynamic feature. You can add as many conditions you want. You can add different groups to get all the business logic that you need as you're moving this data from point A to point B, or from point A and point B to point C. After you've added your filters, you come over here and you get to choose aggregations. So this is where we decided to sum up the amounts generated by lead source. It's a pretty basic select. We're only going to end up with two fields. We select and group by our lead source, and then we sum by the amount. And of course, if there were any other columns that you wanted to group by, you could do that here as well. The last thing that you do when you're creating a job is you just decide the output. So you can have multiple outputs. As you can see, we just had the single output of Snowflake, and we made a table called Salesforce sales data. If we come in over here and we look at our output, it just gives us a couple of different options. Again, we're going with a strategy of overwrite so that we can just keep overwriting this sales data to update it as an aggregate instead of appending to it. But of course, you also have an option to insert, or if this is the first time you're ever running it, it will actually create the table for you with the create out option, and then it'll default to insert for every time the job is run after that. We're grabbing this from our data set, Salesforce sales data, which is just the table that we want to insert things into. It'll also give you a couple other options if you have any other tables available. And then your label for that, we just went with default output, but that just allows you to label your output. And if you wanted to, after labeling your output, you can go ahead and add an additional output. So say if you wanted to add an S3 bucket, choose your S3 bucket that you wanted to add this to, choose your path, and then choose your file name. And then label this, of course, something along the lines of data lake load. And of course, each also gives you the option that if there's a log on writing these error rows, we obviously want to see that. And that you can also choose to skip those rows and just add any additional rows that didn't error out. Your error threshold is just the maximum number of rows that are allowed to fail on a job. It's currently set to -1, which is just unlimited, but that's, of course, configurable. So if we click add, we can now see that we've got two different outputs here, and we can choose the output based on the job as we run it. So the other option that you have available for you when you're creating these jobs is you can create workflows. So if we go in here and we check out workflows, we've created this one called WF. Sorry, so we're going to go to schedule to just see the different scheduled workflows. As you can see, there's quite a few. And I created one called Run Marketing Sync specifically. And essentially what this one does is it runs 3 different jobs. The first job it's going to do is run aggregate marketing data, then aggregate sales data, and then it's going to run the join marketing data tables. The general idea behind that is that you can use this to override both of the tables that a table is based on, and then join and insert that data into your final table. If we go here, this is what the workflow would look like. And of course, if we wanted to add any kind of additional, say we wanted to be able to take that all out to another Snowflake instance, then you could just add an additional job here, drag that over, and then just decide if that's on success or failure. And of course, we're going to do that on success, save it. And so if we were to run this job, it would take us all the way through all 4 jobs. And that way you're allowed to create basic workflows that move data all around, join the data, aggregate the data, as well as pass data from one job to another. So Another thing that's really awesome about how DCP integrates with each system is that they actually allow you to leverage different capabilities. So for example, we created a job called dump marketing data to Snowflake. The idea is this job is even more basic than the other one that you saw. We're taking the marketing cost analysis table that we showed you, and we're just throwing everything out into an S3 bucket. The reason that we're doing this is we're taking advantage of Snowflake's ability to receive notifications and ingest data from an S3 bucket based on what Snowflake refers to as a snow pipe. We're not going to go too deep into that, but it's one of my favorite features of Snowflake is that auto ingestion from different available file systems. So we've set up a Snowpipe instance on our Snowflake tables here. And it's basically just listening on the S3 buckets. And if we were to put anything into that S3 bucket, it would load. So as the data comes through this job, loads into the S3 bucket, it dumps into that table. So the table that everything ends up in is inside of our, oh, these are still jobs. So if we go back to our Explorer, Dataset Explorer, and we go to data source, Snowflake Snowpipe example, we can see that we have this Snowpipe table, which is the table that we set up to automatically ingest from S3 bucket. And it has the exact same data as is available in our marketing analysis table. And when you're setting these jobs up, it is basically something that you can get done in minutes. So if we wanted to create a new job, for example, and let's say we're taking data from Salesforce. So we'll do Salesforce. We just want to be able to see our different Salesforce users. We can create this job. Go ahead and search through all of our tables here for users. And we've got a lot of different tables. I'm going to choose to focus on the actual user table. And as we proceed through, we'll see that we can join on different data sets. So something that might be useful is grab all of your user logins. So now that we've joined that table, you'll see the user login table show up over here on our input data sets. And then we're going to go ahead and skip over to choose columns. I would like to see the IDs, usernames, anything along those lines, department, title, and then we can also get our email. And that'll just give us the ability to see the different logins. And then from user login, we can also see whether our passwords were locked or frozen. So if we were to hop over here, we can create a filter. We've got a pre-built filter called not null, where just user ID is not null. We're going to go ahead and create a new filter. So we click build our own. We're just going to add a condition, and we're going to say that we want to make sure that our is frozen is equal to false. All right. So now we add that over here. We see the filter come up over here. If we wanted to aggregate, we would be able to, but we're just going to go ahead and select every column so that they all show up in our data set. And now that we have that all set up, we can choose our output. We're again going to just choose Snowflake because that's the data warehouse we've chosen to work with in this example. And we're going to load it into our Snowflake data source. Strategy is going to be create a new table. We're going to do that in the public schema, and we're going to name this table user login. So now that we've got this all set up, we can kind of take a last look at our data. And if we do, you'll notice something about the email table, and that's that this has been flagged as a PII column. So we're going to go into that a little bit more in a second. But the idea is that Boomi has the ability to automatically identify different PII data. So our job is pretty much done. At this point, all we have to do is run it. So we'll go ahead and click run. And then while this is running, we'll go ahead and we're going to hop down to manage, and we're going to go into data types. So this is just Boomi's ability to list different kinds of data types and just basically say, is it coming in as an integer, as a Boolean? But additionally, you're also able to say, is it PII data? So you can see here that any table that has a column called email is automatically going to be flagged as PII data just because of the way that we've set up the data types here. And so if we were to add a new data type, we could call it client name, description, name of a client. And then you can also set up your PII masking rules. So this is just going to be whether or not everybody's able to see it. This is all role-based access. But if we wanted to set up anything that had set up our instance so that anything that comes in that is a table that contains the client's name is just automatically masked, this is where we would handle that. So if we come back over here, our job is still running, but you're able, as you can see, you're able to watch this job run in real time. And it'll go through all of the processes of creating that table. While it's doing that, we'll go through a couple of more quick features. So one of my favorite features is that when everything's set up and you've got all of your data where you want it to, a lot of people like to visualize a lot of that data. So if you hop in here to your BI Explorer, we've actually hooked this up to our Tableau instance, just a quick sample instance of Tableau. And there's some sample data that we've loaded into our Tableau that just has a couple of graphs. So not only can you see all of your data sources in DCP, but you can also manage or just view your different graphics that are coming in from a Tableau instance or any kind of visualization software that you might have. It's the same setup as everything else. All you have to do is hop in here to your adapters and install whatever adapter is related to the software you're trying to use. Cool. And so our Salesforce user sync has finished. And if we were to hop back into manage, just to be thorough, we know that we synced this to our Salesforce data source, or sorry, our Snowflake data source. I do not have this set up to sync on any intervals, so I have to come in here and I'll do import data source, which will just import any new or existing data sets, depending on how you decide to set up the import. And then once that import is finished running, we should be able to hop back up here to our Dataset Explorer, choose our data set as Snowflake, and then we'll see our new user login table right here. Cool, and it's relatively sparse, but this is just a quick and dirty example of how you can create a really fast job to load any kind of data from one source to another. And even if the table doesn't currently exist, we can set the job to create that table on the fly. And then, as I said before, if we were to hop back in here and look at this job, so we did Salesforce user sync. And if you were to come back and see how the output is configured now, you can schedule this job right off the bat because the output will change from create to insert, and then you can run it as many times as you want. And that's just a quick overview of how DCP works, how it can interact with Snowflake. We've shown you a couple of different examples of setting it up to an S3 bucket, of setting it up directly, consuming into Snowflake, as well as consuming from multiple data sources. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Stephanie, and we're going to enter our Q&A session.
Yeah, great job, Hart. Any questions at this time, we'll definitely take them. So just place them into the chat. One that we have received already was, why did you choose Snowflake as a data output?
Absolutely. So Snowflake is one of my favorite data warehouses. It just, we like to get it, like I said, we're a partner of Snowflake, and we just like to get its name out there as often as possible, just because it has a lot of different capabilities, especially in situations like this. As I showed, you can auto ingest from S3 buckets or from GCP or from Azure, depending on how you set things up, as well as there's little to no setup. We didn't have to install anything anywhere. When you start a Snowflake account, it just spins up, everything's ready, and you can just start playing with it and using it. And it also separates compute from any kind of charging. So it's just a great way to kind of have a warehouse that if you're not using it, you're not paying for it. And it just spins up as you query it. And otherwise, you're just being charged for anything stored.
Right. We also have one more that says, when would you use DCP over an iPaaS solution, such as a Boomi integration?
Yeah, so there is a reason that Boomi has their integration platform as well as DCP. DCP is going to be more for a browsing, discovery, and quick job sort of scenario. I would say that once the business logic gets a little more complex, once you're enriching your tables from APIs, and once you're trying to do anything that actually starts to involve APIs, especially, that's a good point at which you would probably start switching to your classic integration methods. Whereas DCP is more of a browse through existing data sources in your corporation and help to coordinate and move and expose that data to people who need to see it, as opposed to an integration platform, which is generally used to manage new applications that are being onboarded, or pipelines that need to be very enriched from different APIs as they're being moved into a data source.
Awesome, great response. Any other questions that anyone would like to place in the chat? We still have a couple minutes and we'd be happy to answer them for you.